There is a place down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, affectionately known to most as Death Valley. It was given that name because for decades now, it's been appropriately a place where offenses have gone to die. And for the last couple of years, the undisputed king of that hellhole has been Jamal Adams. From the moment he stepped on campus in 2014, Adams was being groomed for leadership. He was the first true freshman ever in the Les Miles era, which spanned 12 seasons, to be named as a team captain for a game. The first one. No matter what, he's always been a guy that the rest of the team could look up to take control of the sidelines, get everyone dialed in pregame, and keep them dialed in on the field. For that reason, I've kind of adjusted my pro comparison for him this week from Tyrann Mathieu to the great Brian Dawkins. And for anyone who ever watched Dawkins play, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He was the lifeblood of those late 90s, early to mid 2000s Eagles defenses. He was everything to them.
Whatever you got today, I got to have it. Relax, have a good time, and most of all, act the fool.
He set the tone every day in the locker room. He was their source of energy on the field. He got them lined up properly and in position to make plays. I mean, every single Sunday when he came out of the tunnel, he transformed himself into an actual no bullshit crazy person. And his teammates fed off of that energy. I'm of the belief that all great defenses need at least one guy like that. And you can't be a truly dominant unit without someone that can lead that defense and who can intimidate the other team. The Ravens had Ray Lewis, the Seahawks have Cam Chancellor, and the Texans, of course, have their own resident psychopath / leadership figure in Brian Cushing. You need that type of player to give you the edge, to give you that little extra something that can turn a collection of talent into a very high-functioning unit. That's why Jamal Adams is going to go so high in the draft, because when you're selecting him, you're not just drafting a player. You're drafting a culture. You're handpicking the future leader of your football team. A huge amount of his value, to me, is just in his intangible presence alone, just like it was for Brian Dawkins before him. And a big part of the reason why his leadership resonates so well with the team is because he's such a damn good player. When you talk the talk and walk the walk, teammates are going to be way more likely to listen to what you have to say. For starters, he's an explosive athlete in coverage, particularly in off-man coverage. He's got the feet to drive on underneath routes, he can limit yards after catch to nothing, or just outright break up the pass entirely. He's also got very fluid hips for what you typically find in a box safety, so all these physical skills translate into someone who can play either in that single high roll or down in the slot as a nickel defender, and he can play either position at a high level. And speaking of playing center field, he does have the speed to be a full-time free safety if he needs to be. He's not quite as fast as Malik Hooker, but he can get from center field to the sideline, and he can get from one hash to the opposite numbers just fine. Ignore the results of these passes, by the way. I don't really care about those. I'm just watching where Adams starts on these snaps and where he ends up. If you can get from hash to numbers without really breaking a sweat, then you can play free safety in the NFL. I'm not worried about him at all. Adams is also a great tackler in space. There was a catch underneath him in the Auburn game, and he came downhill with a great angle. The receiver tried to fake inside though, so Adams started shuffling laterally to reset his angle, then reflipped his hips to get to the corner and make the tackle. That is textbook. He didn't double down on the angle and miss. He didn't stop dead in his tracks and panic on the cutback, which would have given up the corner by default. He just reverted back to his muscle memory and his mechanics and shuffled until the receiver decided what he wanted to do. This right here is how you handle speed in the open field. And there were other examples of this in every other game as well, whether it was shuffling to keep Lamar Jackson, one of the most dangerous runners in the country, from getting the edge, or using his natural athleticism to track down a bubbling ball carrier to the outside. If he was running you down in space, more often than not, you were going to have nowhere to go because he's too athletic and too disciplined. Now, there were some times when I felt like he sat a little bit too passively when he was shuffling or breaking down in space and waited for the ball to get to him because he didn't want to miss the tackle, which ironically then resulted in the ball carrier having enough space to make a move and make him miss in the first place. But it wasn't like a huge, egregious problem. He just needs to learn to force the issue a little bit more and stop giving ball carriers room to make that cut. He's got the shuffle down and he's got the angles down, he just needs to pull the trigger a little bit earlier. Getting back to what he does well, I mentioned Adams' range as a center fielder a bit earlier, and that range also showed up against the run as a backside pursuit defender. Again, he doesn't have blinding speed like Malik Hooker or Earl Thomas, but he's still fast enough to be a ferocious run defender in the open field who can track down everything from running backs to mobile quarterbacks to wide receivers from behind. You won't have to worry about your defense handling speed to the edges as long as he's on the field, And you won't have to worry about receivers just flat out running away from him deep downfield either. In fact, when he did give up catches, I typically attributed it more to either bad alignment, like lining up for some reason with outside leverage when he's in off-man coverage responsibility, or bad footwork and technique downfield. It was all about fundamentals rather than any sort of lack of athleticism. In the first quarter of the bowl game against Louisville, he gave up a deep ball against James Quick when he was on him 10 yards off in man coverage. He's bailing and running at the snap like it's a go route here, and Quick gets him with the double move. This is entirely on Adams' technique because he played it all the wrong way from the waist down. When you are that far off and you're using a bail technique to track the receiver and the ball at the same time, if you read a break to the outside, you don't pivot with your back facing away from the receiver and the quarterback. That's just asking for trouble. I'm going to use Kevin Johnson's Kollmann workout video from a few years ago as an example of what he should have done here in terms of how you flip your hips and what footwork to use against this move. You have to be able to flip and turn all the way around while facing the receiver and moving backwards, which admittedly is way harder, not everyone can do that, but the reason you flip while moving backwards and facing towards the receiver is so that you always have your eyes on the route, and you can read whether it's a double move or not. Adams flipped the wrong way, so he didn't ID the double move until it was too late because he couldn't see it. It was behind him. When you look at Johnson's Kollmann workout video, the reason why they run this drill at the Combine in the first place is to see if a DB can do that flip from one side to the other to cover this kind of route while looking at the receiver. Johnson had some of the best feet and hips I've seen in a cornerback prospect in the past several years, so he's the perfect teaching tape for this. See how he's able to transition himself from the inside bail to the outside bail in just 2 steps? That's about as good as it can possibly get. To be that fluid and effortless, that's what coaches like to see. And see how he then pivots himself back around to get to the far hash? That's to simulate the exact kind of route that Adams just got burned on here. They want to see if you can bail inside, read the outside break, flip and get over the top of it, then ID the double move and immediately turn back inside the other way to get across the field to break it up. In terms of mechanics and technique, that's pretty much the only way to stop that route in off-man coverage with zero safety help. Adams simply had bad technique. He pivoted the wrong way and paid the price. I'm interested in seeing him at the Combine running this drill because that's where we're going to find out if this play is simply an illustration of something he needs to learn how to do, or if it's something that is an actual physical limitation. That drill is going to tell us everything we need to know. And while we're on the negative for a little bit, I also feel like a place where Adams can improve is physicality when taking on blocks. I think that sometimes he's a little bit too passive and just holds that outside lane as the force player rather than stacking and being ready to shed inside if he needs to. He's a very physical player in general, and he's not afraid to mix it up in the box, and he's not afraid to hit people. But for whatever reason, when he's taking on a block, he can get washed out a little bit, especially against bigger tight ends like O.J. Howard. I've seen him be extremely physical on special teams and as a tackler before. I mean, he's lit some dudes up, so I know he's not soft. I just want to see him take on blocks with a little bit more urgency. And yes, I will find any excuse I can to put his work on special teams into this video, because having a fast, fluid athlete like him on your special teams can really make a difference. Whether he's blocking for your return man or downing the ball inside the 5 as a gunner, he can help your football team on all 4 downs. So we've covered almost everything you can possibly talk about with Adams so far in this episode. He's a great athlete, he's a tone setter in the locker room, he's versatile, he can be just as big of a role player on special teams as he is on defense. But none of those things are what I consider to be his X factor. What really puts him over the top in terms of being a special individual football player are his instincts and intelligence. He is so smart and diagnoses plays so quickly from everywhere on the field. As an example, take a look at this exotic look from the Alabama game very early in the first quarter. You've got man-to-man coverage with Trey White outside on the boundary side of the field with a double green dog look to the tight end and running back with Duke Riley and John Battle respectively. Inside linebacker Kendall Beckwith is also showing pressure up the middle, but in reality he's dropping out into a mixed man and zone look on the field side or wide side of the field. And in that man-zone hybrid, you've got one corner and press on the tip of the receiver stack, he's in man, while the off cornerback, Dwayne Thomas, and Beckwith are teaming up to bracket Calvin Ridley, the trail man in the stack for Alabama. Since Thomas is so far off, he's responsible for any outside releases, whether short or long, while Beckwith is just there to undercut anything short and inside, because there's no way in hell that Thomas can close on anything underneath from that far away. Meanwhile, Adams is behind them just floating deep to either help Beckwith with any inside releases, especially inside breaking routes that go deep downfield, And he's also there to help bracket with Thomas if Ridley runs anything deep and outside, like a corner route, post corner, fade, etc., etc. Essentially, Adams is just making sure that nothing gets open deep, and he's got license to play the ball as aggressively as possible. When looking at the big picture of this pre-snap, this is a very exotic look, especially for a college defense. Because when you've got mixed man-zone coverages, green dogs, pre-snap disguises, the works. You've got a lot going on here. Anyway, post-snap, Adams starts turning towards that boundary before Jalen Hurts takes a single step because he can just feel something is coming in that direction. He sees that two-receiver stack, and he can just tell that Lane Kiffin wants to give Jalen Hurts an easy throw to start off the game, likely with a half-field read, which means the ball's going to go towards the boundary. When he then sees Hurts start rolling out towards that boundary, that confirms it for him. Designed rollouts like that are meant to make everything easier on the quarterback because you're only reading half the field. But they also basically hold up a neon sign at the defense saying, hey, I'm throwing it right here, see if you can stop it. Well, for a seasoned safety like Adams, he loves seeing that neon sign because it means he doesn't have to worry about any inside releases at all, and he can just wait for the ball to come to him deep downfield. And of course, Hurts threw it right to him, just like Adams knew he would. He saw the formation pre-snap, made an educated guess about what Lane Kiffin likes to call from that formation, and when Hurts' rollout backed up that educated guess, he put himself in position to make the play. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, are what instincts and football IQ look like, and Jamal Adams has both of those things in spades. So to summarize, we've got one of the best safety prospects in the last decade here. He's explosive in short areas and can cover tight ends, running backs, and receivers in the slot. He's got enough straight line speed to play a center field role. He's got special teams versatility and can help the team on all 4 downs. He's got more intangibles than maybe anybody else in this entire draft class. He's from an NFL bloodline from his father, who was a former first-round pick and Super Bowl champion with the Giants. The fact that my biggest gripes about him as a prospect are that I wish he'd be a bit more physical when taking on blocks, and that he's not a huge knock-you-out kind of hitter. That's pretty minor stuff, all things considered. It's not like he gets blown off the line of scrimmage, and it's not like he can't tackle. He's just not quite the same caliber of hitter that TJ Ward or Cam Chancellor are, and I can live with that. He sets the tone on the field in other, arguably more valuable ways. When you look at what Adams brings to the table compared to what he doesn't, he is still easily worth a top 5 pick. And you know what? If teams could go back in time and have an opportunity to redraft Brian Dawkins coming out of college in 1996, I'm sure he'd go in the top 5 too. Safeties like this just do not come around that often, but most importantly, leaders like this just do not come around that often. So when you see an opportunity to draft one, you take it. No questions asked. Alright, that's all I've got for this week. Next week we'll have an episode on the other elite safety prospect in this year's loaded safety class, Malik Hooker from Ohio State. There could be as many as 5 or 6 safeties that go in the first round, maybe even 3 in the top 16 picks if you like Eddie Jackson as much as I do. And some think that Hooker is going to be the first one that goes off the board. I personally think it's going to be Adams, but you can make an argument for either one of them. They're both game changers in their own unique ways. So next Thursday on the Film Room, I'll break down Hooker's skill set and what he can bring to a football team, and you guys can decide for yourself who you like better. Until then, later.